30, and we'll look at chapter 11. Jesus cleared out the temple. Chapter 11. Jesus cleared out the temple. Someone read for us John 2, 13 through 25. John 2, 13 through 25. John 2, 13 through 25.
When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at the tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all the temple courts, both the sheep and the cattle. He scattered the coins of money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. Stop turning my father's house into a market." His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume you." The Jews then responded to him, "What sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." They replied, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you are going to raise it in 3 days." But the temple he had spoken of was his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples recalled what he had said. Then they believed the scripture and the words that Jesus had spoken. Now, while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover festival, many people saw the signs he was performing and believed in his name. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people. He did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person.
Great. All right, somebody read for us the first two paragraphs on page 30.
Jesus' evangelistic work in Galilee had far begun before it was time for him to make his annual trip to Jerusalem for the Passover. When he got to Jerusalem, he went up to the temple grounds. Then Jesus, the quiet teacher from Galilee, was incensed at what he saw. People were selling cattle, sheep, and doves within the temple complex. There was probably no law prohibiting the selling of animals and birds on the temple grounds, but Jesus found it unacceptable, for the sellers were making merchandise out of religion and doing it at the most sacred place in the nation. What was worse, there were money changers sitting at tables, ready to exchange local coins for foreign coins, because foreign coins could not be used at the temple. Jesus did not bother to complain to the priests. That would have done no good, for the priests no doubt profited from the selling of animals and exchange of money.
Great. Somebody read the next two paragraphs for us.
So Jesus made a whip of cords and drove the sheep and cattle from the temple area and overturned the tables of the money changers and scattered their coins. He said to the people that sold doves, "Make these things away. Do not make my father's house a house of merchandise." John 2:16. Jesus was very protective of the temple, which he considered to be his father's house. Much later, Jesus' disciples remembered that it was written of him in the Psalm, "Zeal for your house will consume me." John 2:17, Psalm 69:9. Jesus' actions got the attention of the people. They perceived that his driving the animals out and his overturning of the tables of the money changers was a religious and symbolical act, something like what a prophet might do. So they demanded of Jesus, "What signs do you show to us since you do these things?" John 2:18.
Great. Somebody read for us the next three paragraphs on 31.
Jesus responded with an enigmatic prophecy. He said, "Destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days." John 2, verse 19. Jesus knew, of course, that those people would not understand the significance of his enigmatic remark, but he was not ready to explain to them what his mission was. His words show, however, that he already saw the dark clouds that hung over his mission and the rosy dawn that would follow. The people ridiculed Jesus' words, saying, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you are going to raise it in 3 days?" The Apostle John, who recorded this conversation, explained that Jesus was not referring to the temple, but to his own body. John 2, verse 21. The Apostle John has also recorded John 2, verse 22, that Jesus' disciple recalled this prophecy after Jesus was raised from the dead, and that it caused them all the more to believe the scriptures and what Jesus has said. there were many people present in Jerusalem for that Passover feast, and they saw the signs that Jesus did, and many of them believed on his name, John 2, verse 23. But Jesus did not fully trust any of them because he knew what kind of people they were, John 2, 24, 25.
All right, great. Now this picks up in this John 2:13, literally right after where we were last 2 weeks, because we ended in John 2:12. So it just starts off, there's no verse differential, but there's time that passed by. Now this is verse 13. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand. Jesus went up to Jerusalem. It takes about 31 hours to walk from Nazareth to Jerusalem, according to Google Maps. An hour and 40 minutes to drive. So if they had cars, they'd be able to get through their ministry a lot faster than they were able to. So basically, this is more than a day's journey to get down here. Remember, Galilee is north, Jerusalem is south, right? So just remember that in terms of geography. I like how the author is saying that in this first paragraph on page 30, that this was Jesus's annual trip to Jerusalem for Passover. Jesus and Jerusalem are a reoccurring theme throughout the 3.5 years of his ministry. So keep that in mind. Also, since we're looking at this in terms of a timeline, sometimes we'll hear and remember these stories, but outside of time, right? It's interesting to think that Jesus overturned these money tables in the beginning of his ministry, right? Like not in the middle, not at the end. This was the first time he came back to Jerusalem as a grown man in his ministry, not as a grown man, but a grown man in his ministry, because he now has his disciples, his followers. He did a miracle in front of the presence of people that seen it and witnessed. He have some people that believe in him, and all of things are going to play into his ministry. So that's very telling to say as a foundational piece that he went into Jerusalem during Passover. He has no authority in Jerusalem from what the people can perceive or what from the nation of Israel can perceive or have given him inside the temple. Now, in terms of divinity, that's a whole nother story. But in terms of their structure as a people, he has no authority in their mind to do any of these things we're about to recap. So he goes in there and then he finds what first off in verse 14?
He found the temple, they were selling animals.
So they were doing two things, right? They were selling animals and they were exchanging money. Why were they exchanging money? The selling of the animals makes sense because it sounds like they were, if you came to the temple without a sacrifice, but you had some money, you can buy your sacrifice. So that kind of makes sense. But why were they exchanging money, the author says?
Because foreign currency wasn't allowed.
Right. They're not free. Right? They don't rule over themselves. What country rule, what nation rules over them? Right? The Roman government. Right? Rome, not Italy like we know Rome, right? So the Roman government ruled over them. In that region, people spoke Hebrew and what other two common languages? Greek and what else? Right? So these were the languages that people spoke. When you hear people speaking different languages, that also means they're coming from different cultures, different regions of this Mediterranean area, and that means different currency, right? So banking system goes back thousands upon thousands of years, but the nation of Israel was concerned with their currency and what they deemed as holy for purchase. Therefore, before you can buy, if you came from some other part of your region, you had to exchange your money from your foreign currency into a currency that the priest at the temple would receive. All right, got it. Then Jesus did what? In verse 15, what was his reaction to what he saw? So he made a whip of cords. That already seems kind of strange.
And drove them out of the temple.
Right? So he's whipping the money changer and the people selling
animals
and the sheep, the oxen, right? He's whipping them out of the temple. Very strange scene. Right? Poured out the money changer's money, right? Already this is very strange, and overturned the tables. Now, In terms of a business, if you were to forget a bank, because a bank have a security guard, right? So even then, if you were to try to do something like this would be result in you getting tased or shot, right? But in terms of a business, if you did something to somebody's business and you laid hands on their register and threw it on the floor, what would you think the response would be? Right? Because he threw their money on the ground. Like, some people are very particular with their money. Some people only want their money, the bills facing the same way in their wallet. They don't want, some people just take their money and just stuff it in their pocket. Other people want their money clean, right? He threw their money on the ground, right? Drove them out with a whip, drove their animals out. What if the birds, once they got out the temple, what if they flew away? Right? Overturned the tables. What? Just a reaction from the people first. Let's talk about that, not from Jesus, right? Just thinking of the people who were doing the selling, not necessarily the buying first. The people who were doing the selling, what do you think their reaction could have been?
Oh, they could have fought him. They could have jumped him. I mean, that's their livelihood. So, it's like, those are like things that you would fight over, right? People say, don't mess with my money. Because when you start that, they're ready to fight you. This is their livelihood. And now it's scattered. The animals are scattered. The money's scattered all over the ground. And he's hitting them with a cord. With a
or
whip.
hitting at them, so they're running.
So they're running away from you.
Yeah, this can be perceived as a miracle in and of itself that they didn't lay hands on him. Because if you try to replicate this in another church right now, somebody will lay hands on you. That I can guarantee you. The most peaceful religious people, somebody going to lay hands on you, because this is disrespectful, right? To the people is disrespectful. But Jesus's point was his act isn't disrespectful to them because what they were doing is disrespectful to who? God, right? And he mentions God as his what? Starts with an F in verse 16. His Father, right? Take these things away, exclamation point. Do not make my Father's house a house of merchandise. What does that mean?
Like a store, selling, like buying and selling a store.
Don't make God's house a business. The business is buying and selling. In America, when you want to have a congregation, they don't understand the concept of one church and local congregations. Therefore, they call every congregation a church. If you want to have a church, you need to be labeled as a nonprofit here in America, right? So it doesn't matter if you don't want to see yourself as a business. In order to gather legally here to the country in which you live in your local state, you are seen as a business. Therefore, there are bylaws and things that you have to put in place to operate as a congregation. That falls into Jesus paying taxes and him telling his disciples, render to Caesar what Caesar, render to God what's God, right? Different countries have different rules, right? But in terms of how you are operating in terms of inside of worship service, there's a distinction between worship and Bible study. There's a distinction between potluck and worship service, right? Sunday, we ate in another room. We did not eat in the same room we have worship service in. You know why? Because people would have got so relaxed between 1 and 3 that they never would have been able to put their mind back into worship mode at 3:30, right? Because it would have been too relaxed. How do we know that? 1 Corinthians 11, people tried to do Lord's Supper as a meal. And it became so relaxed that everyone ate up all the emblems. And then people were like, there's no more Lord's Supper left. It's just food left. And that's when Paul was like, you got to stop doing it that way. Once it's the same way when people say in work, dress a certain way. Because you act how you dress. If you come relaxed, shorts, flip-flop, right? People feel, well, maybe you be too relaxed to do your job. Dress appropriately to get your mind into a certain standpoint. He is talking about that from a lot of angles, that this concept of don't turn his Father's house into a business or a store where you're buying, selling, and doing currency exchange, right? That should not be inside of the temple. This is why even now when you have worship service in modern times and building, you have people will separate in terms of the building of what they'll have as a sanctuary. They'll have a foyer, right? If you're buying or selling and t-shirts or CDs for singing groups, people put that in the foyer, right? There was a time congregation, somebody had some t-shirts up at the back wall in Trumbull, and the elders made them take that down. You may say, what's the big deal? Put that in the foyer, right? We're not going to be doing Lord's Supper and somebody look on the back wall and think, man, I can't wait for church over so I can buy that $25 t-shirt, right? You got to do things in decency and order, because the human mind will wander very quickly. And now it's not about the sin in my life and the death angel that passed over that gave us life. Now it's about, man, I forgot my dove at home and I got to stand in this long line and get a dove, and I don't have local money. Now I got to stand in another line to exchange my money. Your mind is already gone off of the purpose that you came there, which was remembering that God passed over and literally allowed you to have life. So these are all the backdrops to why Jesus was feeling the way he was feeling about not turning his father's house into a store. Also, it's a big deal that he's calling God his father, right? It's not a big deal to us because we're post Jesus's death, burial, resurrection in the New Testament. But at this time, this is very rare for him to be speaking that way. Almost, and the Pharisees will consider it as blasphemy, because the Pharisees say, in order for you to say God is your father, that means you're making it seem like you're equal with God, because in their culture, the son get everything the father had. So how you figure you equal to him by saying, oh, that's my dad? Like, that would be, remember, the Pharisees were, that boiled their blood that he kept saying that. So that's also something to note there. And then in verse 17, the disciples remembered. This goes back to, I think some people were talking about this, about Nathaniel, Philip, and a couple people that they were scripture readers, right? Scroll readers. This proves that point from a couple weeks ago. 17 says, the disciples remember is written. This is in Psalm 69:9. Zeal for your house has consumed me or eaten me up. So his disciples know some scripture, what we will call Bible, right? But there is no Bible yet because it's not organized in their laws, what they would be saying. That's a prophecy. So now the disciples are looking, look like he's fulfilling prophecy. Remember, Andrew said, hey, we found the what? The Messiah. So now this verse and his action, wow, look at that mirroring and matching up. Verse 18, the Jews were demanding, hey, what sign do you have to show us to have some authority over the things that you're doing? Valid question. 19, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. Then the Jews said, it has taken 46 years to build this temple. Will you raise it up in 3 days? John, as an author, remember, he's writing after Jesus already went back into heaven. Now he's explaining to his readers who are reading this as a book, hey, this isn't talking about the physical temple, but it's talking about his body in verse 21. And then verse 22, he proves that by saying, when his disciples, even who didn't fully grasp that, after he rose from the dead, remembered this event, they believed even more, right? And they believed the scriptures and the word which Jesus had said to them. That's like an aside of what John was saying. Verse 23 goes back into the timeline of the story. Now, when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover during the feast, many people believed in his name when they saw the things which he did, but Jesus did not. Interesting that he uses this terminology, commit to them or trust them, because he knew their intentions. Verse 25, he had no need that anyone should testify of him or man, for he knew what he was in man. Okay, let's recap. Anybody have any comments, thoughts, or anything related to this? Yes.
There's 3 times out of the year that the Jews were commanded to go up to Jerusalem: the Passover, the Shabbat, and the Sukkot. And in the first century, when pilgrims arrived in Jerusalem, they frequently encountered money changers and merchants around Jerusalem. I guess to your point that you're making, with those festivals, the temple was not separated. It started on the outside, but it came on the inside, and the Sanhedrin allowed it. So when Jesus got there, Jesus is looking for a spiritual vibe, but it was just business, and they had restrictions on any other coin that represented a king to be interchanged with money inside the temple according to the Mosaic law. So on top of all that, Jesus seen all these foreigners. It was like a flea market, and people were bringing money from their own homeland that they pilgrim up to Jerusalem to be part of the festival. And I guess it just hit him that this is outrageous. So in the 3.5 years, it was a struggle because they fought back. They pressed back on him about your authority and this or that. But can you imagine how he felt representing God, that inside the temple, it was a mess? Because Jesus, as he stated at the end of the scripture there, he knows the hearts and minds of men. So he doesn't have to justify why he said what he said, because spiritually he's seen it was totally out of control, and the temple no longer housed the spirit for someone to come in and pray to God.
Yeah, because there'd be 1 million plus people swell into this city during these festivals. Just like right now, when it's 4th of July, people are gonna say, "What? Let's go down towards Park Avenue and let's sell balloons, right? Or let's sell them light up things, or let's sell the goggles." Because you thinking what? A lot of people are gonna be down there. If we buy maybe $1,000 worth, we can sell maybe $5,000 worth. We made 4,000 because people are coming to celebrate, right? Religious things are the same way. People were looking at it not as, hey, this is a time to remember, but this is a time to make money. The city is going to be on swole. And not only that, people are going to travel, which means they're not going to have a sacrifice according to the Mosaic law, right? You're not going to have nothing without blemish traveling all that distance. And you're not going to have money because you live far away from Jerusalem. So we have 2 opportunities to make money there. And they said, people are in the city. The city is occupied by Roman government. So it's foreigners walking all over the place. So it just got so big, and people start doing things out of convenience, where this flea market / farmer's market / bank just was the temple. Just do everything here. Take your sacrifice. Just keep walking down this conveyor belt line, and they'll sacrifice it, go outside, and God love you, and go back to wherever you came from. So I agree. This changed the whole dynamic of the purpose and the place in which they were doing these things. David, and then we'll come back around.
So I looked at the map of the temple and the layout of it. It was called a porch all around the perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a wall around the temple.
Mm-hmm.
In that was the court. That's where Jesus wiped everybody out. The court's supposed to be Gentiles could come there and pray, but before they couldn't do business.
Right.
That's what they were doing. They were holding business courts around the temple.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't inside the temple.
So that means there was no opportunity for its intended purpose of any prayer or anything like that, right? So it was against the design. And again, just think of that logically from God. God never wanted a temple to begin with. They wanted that, right? He never wanted that. Just like he never wanted a king for them. They wanted that. And therefore, I gave you what you asked for. All I asked for was use it this specific way, knowing that I never wanted that. And you still couldn't follow instructions, written instructions, verbatim instructions like, don't do this here, do this there, make sure this is, still couldn't follow. So, I mean, that's sad truth, but it is true. Yes.
Yeah. Just imagine you're at your house and a stranger just comes in and just makes a mess of your house. And don't even have to be a stranger. I mean,
Somebody you know.
Somebody you know. I mean, I walk in the house with my shoes on. Chrissy's ready to disown me most of the times because she's so upset about me walking in with my shoes on. I forgot. But you could imagine how Jesus felt at that point with the disrespect that they gave to God's house and God's worship place. And then you look at the people and the foreigners who's traveling. They're traveling with good intentions to go and worship God and to give sacrifices to the Lord, but yet you have all of these people taking advantage of them and trying to make as much money as possible. You know, when there's money and money exchanging, you know it's all sort of corruption going on there. And so you're messing up people's worship and the proper worship that God needs to have when that time comes around. It reminds me of the story of the two boys. Was it Samuel's kids? I forget. The two boys that were sleeping with kids and with women. And yeah, it reminds me of their story where they're taken away from God's worship by, taking the sacrifice and sleeping with women and doing all types of corruptible things in the worship place. So
yeah, I mean, this thing reminds me of in modern times, right? In the 90s, it was a big deal with TV evangelism where you'd be able to buy a prayer cloth and you will watch and you purchase this prayer cloth, be $19 or whatever. And when you have that, you have salvation, right? A lot of people purchase that because you appeal to their emotions, right? Like you are a sinner. People feel I do sin a lot. And you not a holy person. People say, no, I'm not a holy person. I don't live holy. I don't talk holy, dress holy. My house not holy, nothing, right? Where we are that you're watching this is a holy place. So I'm going to dip this cloth in this holy water, but for you to get it and bring this holiness to where you live, you got to pay money. So somebody says that's logical because I don't have holiness, how I'm going to get it. So the number come at the bottom of the screen and the operator will take your call and your credit card. And that got a lot of people, right? Because people's intentions were, I want to be holier. So I'm watching this. This guy seems like a holy person, right? And he's not asking that much, right? Not like he asked for me to give up everything I had or come to where he is. He's willing to send his holiness to where I am. So I just got to pay $20, $25, maybe shipping and handling. And now I have that in my presence, right? Catholics do the same thing with those candles or those statues. That costs money. That's not free. Don't just think you could just run into anywhere and just be like, let me just grab a candle. That stuff come on the bottom with a seal. You can't just start selling bootleg candles. So therefore, somebody like, I need a real Virgin Mary candle. That costs money, right? Anything that you have gonna cost money. Just like a Bible and a songbook cost money, the same thing. So somebody saying, I need this thing to make me or my house holy goes on today. That literally happens right now. Other cultures are the same way. You go to a temple, the temple is there. You got to go back home. So they're going to sell some things for you to give as a sacrifice and some other trinkets to bring back to your house. That costs money, though. It's not free. Not like priests and monks just giving out free stuff. Because how would they give it to you? So therefore, you're playing on people's emotions and understanding that they're doing wrong. And you're saying the only way to do right is this. Right? And they're going to say, I don't have a dove. I don't have an oxen or any of these things. We have it. So now there's so much that I need to do. You're giving a service to me. See, I'm not looking at it as you exploiting me. He's helping me, but he is exploiting me because of all these things that we mentioned. But that's how they were able to get them, because they used it from a spiritual standpoint. People do that every day today. We feel like people have good intentions. We feel like people just misapplying verses. The Bible says no. People are false teachers purposely leading people astray. It's not just everybody reading it thinking, oh, some people read it and are confused. But some people know exactly what that's saying, use it as their advantage to have control over people. Because they know that those words are so powerful, even if you were blind, deaf, or dumb, it will change your life. So I don't have to believe it. I just got to get you to believe it. And you believe it enough that anything I say to get more of it, you would do. And that's how you have the whole religious community in the United States exploiting for religion for profit. right? That's just how that grew, because people seen the reaction to everyday people to the word. And now when you start thinking that, you think there's nothing somebody won't do to help them feel that they're not a sinner. Nothing like anything else. People will forsake their mother, their father, their husband, their kids to not feel like a sinner. See, Church of Christ, we don't have that level of commitment. So things like this, we laugh. That's why even when I said buying the prayer cross, some people laugh because you don't have that commitment. It's people that will kill themselves. It's people that will cut themselves to stop feeling like that's a sinner. You can't even come to church every week. So you don't understand that. But it's people that will mutilate themselves. That's the level of commitment they have. So if somebody sees that and says, man, I can make money off this person. Hey, man, what you doing? No. Just buy this thing. You think that's all I got to do? That's it. Just buy this. I convince a couple of those people, I'm in 100,000 to a millionaire status. That happens every day. So this is funny that Jesus starts his ministry off like this. They didn't learn, and neither did we, because even today, this happens everywhere. Like I said, other cultures, it happens too with temple, but where we are, this happens every state, every city. Because people know people going to want to be saved by any means necessary. In the Renaissance period, priests were selling salvation to rich people, and they buy salvation for their whole family and using that money to build out the cathedral. Right? Somebody say, I know I'm not living right. And the priest say, well, God says you got to pay. I'm not living right. How I know God didn't say that? Because faith come by what? I didn't read the Bible. So what did I hear? You reading it. You telling me, Ellis, the Bible says you got to pay. You're a priest. What am I supposed to do? So I pay. And I say, I don't want to just be saved. I need my whole family. So the priest said, well, you got to pay for you, your wife, your kids, your aunts, uncles, everybody. That was a time period. These sort of things happen because of people are going to look at this as a business and want to exploit every day of the week and literally, as they say, twice on Sunday. So this is sad that he started his ministry with this, but it didn't resonate. Okay, anybody else? Any other comments related to this? Could be anything. Doesn't have to be on the last couple of comments what we're talking about, but anything from 13 to 25. Yes.
Yeah, what's interesting about this story is that we've heard it so many times how Jesus was angry, Jesus has anger problems, Jesus was aggressive.
Out of control.
We've all heard it,
Yeah.
right? Jesus is out of control. He's so aggressive, and it's okay to be aggressive because Jesus did it. But it's so funny because it's so out of context.
Yeah.
About what happened.
Mhm.
Because as Ricardo said it perfectly. Just imagine your own house, people that you know
Yeah.
come over and mess up your house. Even walk in the house with shoes on, crying out loud. So it just, if you think about it like that, it makes perfect sense.
Yep.
But we just take it out of context so many times.
Yeah, because he was reacting in a spiritual setting for spiritual reasons. That's why I said, hone in on, he said, Father, not his God, right? That's ownership, right? A son going to feel the same way about his parents' house as his parents. If you got your friends over and you thinking, yeah, we can use the house for the party, but the whole time you're not really having fun, you keep cleaning up after your friends because you know that's still your parents' house, right? Same way I said, you invite somebody to church, and most of the time you don't need somebody else. You yourself gonna say, hey man, you just a guest at a picnic. Put that chicken down. It's other people. Because you know that person's action will reflecting on you. Hey, this is my church, right? If Sunday visitors would have been acting some way, you wouldn't need Brother Stanley to say something. Other people would have been like, hey, man, this is my church. We would have had to calm y'all down. Hey, it's not that big of a deal. Because you're going to feel like we made these balloons. We stayed up all night. Not you. You're just a guest. You're going to feel some way. So imagine if Jesus walks in there and sees this as a flea market. Do you know the smell that had to be in there? Not just from the animals being sacrificed, just it's a bad look all around, and it's nothing to do with religion anymore, nothing to do with spiritual, nothing to do with God. and all to do with money and business. And what did Jesus say about you can't serve what? God and money. So interesting. Yes.
I was gonna say too, just this story just kind of brings back to how we should be acting when we're in church. I don't think we take ownership of the church being, a holy place and its hours, and even as a temple. I think we see so many things happen next to us across the room, and we don't say anything about it. But I think we should also hold that zeal and that passion and that anger when something is going on in the church where it's not conducive to what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I mentioned Sunday, right? It could have been like, hey, this is a hassle. We're going to lose time going to that room next door. Why don't we just have everything in one room? Why don't we have everything in one room? Because no one would have been able to focus. Because while we doing Lord's Supper, you would have been too busy playing with the place settings at your table. You wouldn't have been able to focus on Lord's Supper. So even in that setting, someone could have said, what's the big deal? It's only one Sunday. What's the big deal if we do 2 rooms? Literally, what is the big deal? It's not that big of a deal. Once you start diluting worship in any capacity for any amount of time, you already down the path that will lead to this, right? Because somebody said, what's the big deal? It's cold outside. Let's bring the animals inside. If the animals die before people buy them, they can't sacrifice them. Somebody said, what? That's a good idea. Let's bring them in the court. Because in the court, at least it's kind of inside. See? It made logical sense. The problem, though, is it don't make spiritual sense. And that's where we hear. So I agree with that. When you come to worship service, it's not a country club. It's not a hotel room, right? Like, it's time to worship God. You and anything that is connected to you have to be in the mindset of, I'm remembering Jesus's death, his burial and resurrection. And unless something come through this ceiling and strike me dead, nothing is going to break my focus of that. We have to get to that level. That's worshiping at 100%. But if you just feel like, rubber dub dub, thanks for the grub, like prayers like that, like, let me get some cracker and juice. I hope they sing a song that I like. And man, I hope the service not too long. That's nothing, right? That's not worshiping at 100%. That's going somewhere. That's not being a part of the worship service, right? So this is the difference between how intentions, hearts. It's interesting that Jesus ends this with about knowing the hearts. You can bring that verse up, tie that with what Crystal was saying, and bring that up higher to say, God knows your intention in terms of worship service, right? We can go to Jesus' ministry in the future that talks about that. So I agree. Use this also as a concept, especially for us, because we're in a public setting. So think about it as when we come to worship, am I worshiping or am I sitting in a hotel? Right now, that's more difficult for us than somewhere with a building because they can design their building in their room to visually get you into the mode of worshiping. We can only put so many things up on the walls on Sunday because we got to take them off. So therefore, it's more difficult. That's why I was saying 2 Sundays ago, an announcement. It's more difficult in a plant work. It's easy to run back to established church. Sorry. That's not offending anyone. That's true. I dare anyone to tell me that's not true. It's easy to worship somewhere that got a building and established. That's very easy. You just got to go, sit down, don't argue, and go home. We have to set up before anyone can even worship properly and break down. So it's harder. So it's difficult. We don't even know if we in the same room every week. So how are we going to do logistics? All those things weigh on worship service. Therefore, it's harder for us to get our mind into worship, which means we have to be more diligent in doing so. Coming from a foreign place, it's harder because I got to exchange the money and get a sacrifice. That means my mind is already off of Passover. I didn't even get my mind to Passover yet because I have to get something to give. It's harder. Therefore, someone took advantage of me, and therefore I'm in a vulnerable space. Jesus said, stop, this is not right. So that's a good point. Yes, Sister Karen.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's like, I think the 21st century, we try not to be like the denomination so much that we go to a different extent. It's similar like cafe. We try not to copy all the denominations for it. So the same thing with the building. We tend not to focus on the building at all because we know that the church is us.
Yeah.
And because we know that the church is the body, we tend not to think about the building at all, that the building is not important because we know that we could worship just about everywhere. And I think Jesus here emphasizing that the actual building is important should resonate with us. And we should realize that the building actually is important. And it does have some significance. So it's not just a building. You know what I mean? But I think we tend not to concentrate on this much because we try our best. God forbid we act like a denomination. You know what I mean? So we try our best to go to the extreme north.
Yeah, see, if we were worshiping at Seaside Park, literally under a tree, once we start that opening prayer call to worship, that's not Seaside Park under a tree no more. Some people say, yes, it is. We sitting on the sand. Again, we not sitting on sand. Sitting on sand, man, you could take your shoes off. You could build a sand castle. You could play. See, we not sitting on no sand. See what I'm saying? So her point is right. Us, again, Bible studies is different because people are different. We talking to us as a group. That's why Sunday, certain things I was saying, hey, visitors, you here, but we talking to us. You just visit. Us is more difficult because even look at the carpet. The carpet is a distraction to me because I live symmetrically. The lines of the colors are bright and are going this way, and they cut a pattern. So when I'm talking to y'all, look in the middle, this distract me. See? But her point is, you just look at the pictures. Look, who are these? Some Wednesdays I'll be like, who are these people here? Sometimes I be lost off whoever teaching because I'm thinking, man, what was it like in Bridgeport in 1918? See, it's a distraction, but I have to get my mind to the fact that say, I'm not in this, whatever the name of this room is. We studying the Bible. I'm not in the Harbor Room or the Bronson Room or any of these rooms. We having worship service. It does mean something. Does it mean everything to her point? No, right? Does it mean cathedral like some people feel? No, like let me just run into a cathedral and therefore I'm holy? Does not mean that. But once you are conducting a structured worship, yes, there are non-visible things that are changing inside our attitude and also how we view our surroundings in our area. I agree with that, but it's harder for us, especially. We can say, oh, if we were somewhere else and somebody was saying that, we could say, oh, amen. I know what that guy is saying because we worship in a hotel. So it's very difficult to get our mind sometime in a space to worship. And that I feel is a good point to pull from this because these people struggle the same way. Yes, then we come around.
I think that's like what I guess in the Bible where it's talking about. You have certain church members that's like gold and silver, and you have the ones that's like wood and clay. Like because as soon as you leave service, that temple, that whole surrounding that temple, that's as soon as you leave service, that's all you see.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that from Saturday, well Monday to Saturday until Sunday when you come back to service, and then you get away from that temple. And it's like, and it like especially nowadays, everyone does like even coming to church on Sundays. It's like they're doing it for clout. You know what I mean? Like they have their Sunday best on, but you know what I mean? Like me growing up, my mother used to always tell me like she used to always like I used to get upset sometimes. But how come I didn't get this? How come I get that? And she said, well, if you would have listened, I told you to do something. You know what I mean? And then you would have had it. And that's how I feel like sometimes God is like life is so loud. We got life headphones on. We don't hear him calling us. And like every time he calls us, we missing those blessings because we too focused on what's going on around us, not in our business. We too focused on. I'm too focused on what you're doing in life. That I can't focus on what God's calling me. He's been calling me for years. Like you still have people in church right now that got baptized 10 years ago and still in the water. You know, they never came out the water because they still in the water because they so focused on what's going on in life. And it's like, and that's why I'm upset because everyone's focused on making money. And he's over there trying to get you ready for what's going after. The money's not going to matter. It's like you got to do outfit on, but he already told you that he's going to supply your clothes when you get to heaven. So you got to do outfit to come to church.
Yeah, the thing is, there's a saying that people use, a spiritual saying, is that don't be so spiritually minded that you're no earthly good, right? Your head is so far in the clouds. You so busy getting ready for worship that you forget to worship, right? Some people be so busy getting ready for life that they miss their whole life because every year they making plans. And somebody say, well, somebody been planning a business 30 years. And somebody say, but did you ever start? No, right? So then what was the point of all those plans? So you have to have a balance, right? You have to have reverence, preparation, and worship in spirit and truth. That's a balance, right? You got to be able to know the building isn't everything, but still have reverence for when it's time to worship. That's a balance, right? You got to be able to give God your best and not overperform with every nice thing you own. And you coming to church like this because you said, oh, I brought all my nice things. And people think, what are you doing, right? A balance to be able to say, I'm going to give God my best without it being overbearing. So that's a good comment. Yes.
It's going to come a time when the brothers and sisters at Bridgeport are going to argue over articles of worship in the building. And then some of the brothers and sisters that have sat here are going to be there, and they're just going to remind them of what it took to build that foundation. Because some people's worship is attached to how worship was introduced to worship. And that came with a structure.
Yeah.
Remember, the Europeans came over here and brought worship in the building. Worship was spiritual when they got here from the Native Americans. They put it in the building. They put a cross and a steeple on. They rung a bell. You did feel holy because on Sunday you did nothing else. So when a person come in and they tell me all the time, I don't want to sit in a one room with my children on my lap. I want a classroom for my kids to go in while I'm in the adult Bible study class. But see, you have already lost because you was never trained that worship and Bible study is spiritual. So you have attached yourself and the way you and your family going to function to the articles of the building. Now, you're not saying that we're wrong. You're just saying that's not how I want to worship. Now, remember, you only doing that twice a week. And most people that have children don't come to Bible study on Wednesday, whether they got a classroom or not. The attendance is down on Wednesday and down on Sunday evening and up on one day, which is 11 or your traditional worship service. So for those brothers and sisters that labor and bring their children out and come to a place like this, all large churches started this way. A hotel, a community center, a rented facility. Just look at their history and you'll see that. A school, they shared a space with another religious group at a different time. So you don't know that, you don't understand that, but they will tell you that. You look into their archives, you'll see that. But when you get into that building, I've been there, I've done that, and I remember when we argued over the color of the rug. The rug had to match the seat covers on the seat. I remember when we argued that it should be a padded section on the pew instead of a hardback. I remember that we argued that the outer rows had to be tilted in so the people can see the center part where the pulpit was. I remember that. I remember we argued that the baptistry needed two doors, one for the female side, one for the male side. So all those things became articles of worship, just like the brother said on Sunday. How did he put it about coming to church?
There's church work and then there's work.
Yes, yeah. And we do that. And that's going to happen here because people are going to forget where they came from and what it took to get them in that structure. And we're going to start fussing about things that means absolutely no sense at all. But in terms of when we're there, it should be respected. It should be respected.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is you've had people that left here. They'll tell y'all another reason, but they'll say they left because you don't have a building, but they won't tell you that. That's why you champion for them. And you feel like someone ran them out of here. But they say you don't have a building. Some people have told him, when you have building, I'll come back. Haven't some people told you that? Some people say, yeah, man, when y'all get a building, I'll come back. I don't dislike you. I don't feel like you're doing something wrong. It just, this don't work for me. So they say, when you have a building, call me, right? We're going to stop what we doing because we need to remember them. And then we going to have an invitation for them to come back. And then all the labor that y'all been doing, we put you to the back, elevate them, I guess, to the front and say, welcome back, like the prodigal son. I don't know what people be thinking. That's why when that thing that Devlau made, that sign, when we were doing those numbers, the church, I'm going to really read this really quickly. In 1891, the church rented a facility on Beach Street. In 1896, how many years is it from 1891 to 1896? New building was completed. December, right? January 10th, 1897, first worship in new building, right? Destroyed church, fire, 1972, January. 1972 to 1978, rented facility at Oddfellows Hall in Stratford. How many years is 1972 to 1978? Purchased property in Trumbull in 1974. That means 2 years into renting, they purchased property, but construction didn't begin until 1977. How many years from 1974 to 1977? Oh, okay. 1978, members start meeting regularly in new building. 1979, congregation changes name, Church of Christ in Trumbull. And then 1982, we came there. So let's say this, because I could have said that Sunday, hey, it's new people that worship at Trumbull. But that building, it's not a part of that building that I don't know. It was not there 4 years. I've been running around in that church since any member who just was coming here. Every nook and cranny, I done had 1,000 Bible studies there. I done gave thousands of my dollars to that church. See what I'm saying about laying a foundation where that's like somebody telling those of us who worship Trumbull, hey man, we say, you just got to Trumbull. We've been in Trumbull since 80s. Ask Cindy. She tell you what you telling me about Trumbull Church. I've been there since 80s. You didn't even know when there was no downstairs. People say, oh, I don't know. I thought they always had a downstairs. That's like somebody coming here and you be like, you didn't even know we were in the hotel. Oh, I didn't know that about hotel. Okay. You didn't know Fifth Sunday we was written in other facilities. Oh, I didn't know. You didn't know. See, like that is going to happen where people are going to come in and start feeling entitled some way. Some people are going to say, oh, wait. Was grinding before you even got here, laying a foundation so a house could be built on the top. See, that's why history matters. So you can be reminded. You can read this and say, oh, this how we supposed to worship. I forgot because it's just a hotel. But what happens if the United States crumble to the people who can't worship in a hotel? And what happens if the new people come and say, whatever way y'all doing it, we're not doing it that way? Are they going to what? Tell God I can't worship no more? What happens if they got to move to another country? Another country say, we don't have no church steeple, no bell, no, we just in this square. What you going to do? You got to worship because worship have to work in every culture, in every time period. A building is a luxury. Right? When we went to Nepal, they rented out a facility. We had to walk down this corridor, take a left, take a right, two lefts, a right, up, down, sideways, just to get to where the building is. What if we'd have been like, hey man, where are we walking to? I'm tired of walking. They would have been like, what kind of uppity people are y'all that you come here and you not too good to worship with us, right? What if we'd have been like, walked in here and say, what? Man, y'all don't got no sound system, no microphones, no this, no that. Oh, man.
The building had structural damage and we had to take off our shoes.
Yeah, what about that?
A couple of times I look at my feet now.
Yeah, he didn't wear socks.
I don't wear socks. So I forgot about that. I'm in a foreign country barefoot. And I'm saying, man, I got to start putting some socks in my pocket.
You know why? Because culturally, you got to take your shoes. He'd be like, oh, where we from, we don't take our shoes off. What they gonna tell you, brother? We love you, but guess where you not? You not where you from?
United States, bro.
Right? Crystal feel what? We not outside. We inside. So what he had to do, hey, give me a pass because I didn't bring no sock. Next time you should bring some sock. But here, we're not in Bridgeport. We're not in the United States. You got to take your shoes off. See, people who can't tell you what they can't do here, how could they go anywhere in the world? You only be able to, you think the whole world is United States worship, right? So when we're doing the training, I told the brothers, some people do Lord's Supper at the beginning like us, some people do at the end. What if you say, I can't focus, I need to take Lord's Supper first before sermon? They'll tell you, sweetheart, you're gonna have to go in your Google and find you a church, because here we do it at the end. There are things in terms of worship structure that if you start talking to members who've been baptized for decades or from somewhere else, they'll tell you that's a blessing you have there. Some places have no songbooks. They'll tell you, we don't got no money for no songbooks. Some people say, man, y'all always singing new songs. Some people say, I never had a songbook. You just keep humming until you know the word, and then you just sing the word. Like, again, and if you say, no, I need a songbook, some members will tell you, you never could come from the church I came from because we didn't have that. Some people say, oh, I need a projector. Some people say, we don't have no projector. Like, these are things that people get so attached to how they know things that they'll never see a way of, can you worship? Can you worship if we were on a plane and we all moved to the back of the plane and say, you know why? Because in this time zone, it's Sunday morning. Or you going to say, what? We on a plane. We're not even on the ground. What's the big deal? But some of us would be like, I need worship. We'll be arguing that. Some of us will want worship, and some of us will say, we on a plane. What's the big deal? Like, it becomes to that because it's hard to envision. That's why the Israelites were like, we need a king. Because it's hard to envision a cloud and a fire pillar, right? It's easy to envision a crown. It's people feel, I need something. I need a priest. Because it's hard to envision God living inside of me. I need to go somewhere. And when I go there, I feel holy. And when I leave, I feel unholy. That way I keep coming back. But you telling me when I leave, God, the holiness is inside of me. I don't feel that way. So people struggle with that. That's why they make a big deal about the visuals, so that they can go in there and feel God's presence. Don't people say that? Ooh, I just. Don't they say that? Oh, you felt that? The presence of God. When God said, the temple, I need this. This is where I'm living every day. Sister, you have your hand up?
When I first got baptized in 81, the congregation didn't have a building. The community had a hall in the village, and that hall, they having party, they having everything there.
Mm-hmm.
So they had us to rent that hall on a Sunday morning to have worship. And many times we go in there on a Sunday morning. The members have to clean
Before
we start service.
Mm-hmm.
It's beer bottles, rum bottle, all kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to clean it out, everything before we start service. So it is hard that in the beginning, it is very hard to start from scratch. I know about that. I was in that. And it takes us over a year before we get that building.
See, it's difficult. It's not easy.
It is hard.
Imagine we come in here in this beer bottles. What are we gonna do? Right? Already you thinking, what? Like, how we gotta clean up before we even could whatever, right? The men gotta set up before even could have Bible study, right? Because we can't. We turned their thing on Saturday, and the thing was. I was thinking, good thing we don't use their speakers every week. It was talking in alien language. So therefore, we gotta put everything, and then say, okay, brother, go ahead, start. And that's just physical things. Imagine if you had to clean up waste from the night before every Sunday. Some people say, what? Look, I love y'all, but I can't worship here anymore. Yeah, some people will say, I can't worship here. I can't be fooling around with no beer bottles. My mind already centered. I'm gonna walk in, and I'm gonna see if it's beer left. I can't do it. I gotta go somewhere else. Some people will say that, but if we all all did that, then never would have been no church for her to be worshiping at. Somebody got to stay there the year. Got to be a few of them to stay. So that's those transitional things. It's interesting that the comments led us here because that's where Jesus and his ministry is, right? It's at the beginning. They just believe it, right? They're just getting to know him, right? He didn't entrust himself to the people who believe because he knew they didn't fully believe yet, right? Like we looking at as why would you reject some future disciples? Because they don't fully believe yet. Let us come back to Jerusalem later and see if they still believe. We would have been so gung-ho for numbers. We would have told Jesus, hey man, grab a couple of these people from verse 22. And he said, what people? The ones that I'm about to say in verse 24, 25 that I don't trust them? Yeah, because at least they'll be with us. Jesus said, no, let's come back. See if they believe later. See, we be so hung up on numbers. The brother was talking that on Sunday, that we forget to focus on quality. I'd rather have one great dinner than 3 subpar meals. That's me. I'd rather have Thanksgiving. I don't eat breakfast or lunch. I'm good because I feel like I want to focus on the dinner. I don't want Cheerios. I don't want a banana. I don't even want water because my mind is so focused on the quality of the one meal. Some people will be like, no, I'm hungry now. I want a English muffin. I'll look at you like you crazy because English muffin not going to do nothing when I smell macaroni and cheese because I'm putting that at a higher quality. I look at this same thing in terms of people. We could bring anybody in here every Sunday. I tell him that. I tell him I can get you 100 people in here every week. Now they won't stay, but I can bring 100 new people in here every Sunday. Don't I say that? But then what? I didn't say nothing about baptizing them. I didn't say nothing about them being friendly. I didn't say nothing about none of the things that's going to matter, but they will be here. And then people say, oh, it's a lot of people. Quality, though. That's what Jesus could have grabbed these people, right? He could have been like, hey, join us. Come with us. He didn't fool with them. Think about it. Look what it said. He did not commit himself to them, verse 24, because he know all men and he know they were being phony. So he kept it moving. So this kind of study, we'll get into it more with the questions next week, is so multifaceted because I feel like it's in 2 parts, almost you can say 3. But the 2 parts would be like everything up into the temple cleansing and then the reaction, right? The reaction could be broken into 3 parts about the Jews. And when it says Jews, capital J, really talking about the Pharisees, Sadducees, religious leaders, and then the people around reaction coupled with his disciples' reaction. Because remember, John stops, talks about the future, and then comes back to the present in verse 23. But there is a lot to glean from in terms of us and our own walk. It's funny that this is the study we have post the thing we were talking about Sunday. Mom, you have your hand?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at this, I see Jesus as, the Jews want to know by what authority, like why is he doing this? But it's interesting because the people that he drove out of the temple, because this was happening in the temple, right? Not outside the door, not down the street. They were pretty bold with it, right? It was happening in the temple. They were buying and selling. But his authority must have been such where it frightened the people enough where they were going to keep going. And I don't know if it was or what tone he used when he talked about his father's house. He had already declared that the house belonged to God. So maybe that was what they were fearful of. But when you think about it, it is God's house, right? So, and we are his children. So no matter where we are in the presence of God. That reverence is extremely important. I mean, and God demands it. Even just think about even going back to Moses when God is telling Moses to take off his sandals because where you're standing is holy ground. I think sometimes we forget because you can see things that happen in the church, like whatever it is. It doesn't really matter what it is, right? Because everybody can see things going on in the church. And some people won't say anything just because, you know the person, you're friendly with them, you don't want to take them the wrong way. But I think we have to do a better job in saying, yes, when we walk in the door for worship, just imagine how God fills the room, right? Spiritually, right? Because of us. We're worshiping in spirit and in truth. If you don't have that kind of reverence and you mosey in like, you know, you just got out of the bed, the cat just drug you in and you just don't, I mean, that's crazy, right? You are in the presence of God. You are getting ready to offer worship up to him. Does that mean anything? Does that count for anything? Because if it doesn't count, then you really shouldn't be here, because one more person or two more people doesn't really make a difference. Because again, if you go to the discernment, what Jesus said in the heart, I know them, I know their heart, just like Nathaniel. I knew Nathaniel. I know what he does and what he's thinking. He already knew that. That reverence, I think, is extremely important. And we should be so excited. Even when we sing, like, I mean, some people barely open their mouths, right? And some people don't sing. But why? I mean, I don't know what that is, but I think to recalibrate your mind and your focus on, wow, like, you know, I'm walking in the presence of God, and there's just like so much joy and so much love here, because God didn't wake up with his mouth poked out, right? He's excited, and look
He
what
was
he's
waiting
done.
on you.
Yeah, look what he's done for us already. Look, he bought us. He got us here. You know?
That's why it's important to realize that, you know, we talk about in the world culture, church is a culture. When you come to church, you got to leave your culture and adapt to church culture, right? Singing is a part of church culture, right? Like you could not sing anywhere else. Where it should be where your friends see you in church, they should be like, "Who's that?" kind of, right? Like, because it may not be your normal personality, but you like, "Oh, I'm at church though." Like you caught me on a good time, right? And this just stay here, because don't try to make fun of me out there, because that's a different culture. It's okay to realize there is church culture. That's why for us, when we were going through them 10 years, and the other people from the other congregations, remember, they have the luxury to have the community come to them. But the first VBS, you had to go get those kids. When we go to the park, that's why you see some of us making a big deal about the structure, where you may be thinking, what? It's just a picnic. Our point is, if someone came by and we acting some kind of way, you know what people say? What kind of church is that? See, people don't know a building church when they're at the Big E or somewhere else, right? Because we bring the signs, shirts, everything, the van. So people know the church is under the arches, not we having a good time on Memorial Day. That's why we make a big deal, so that if somebody come, ask for food, a track is prepared. But some of us may feel, what's the big deal? It's just a cookout. Anything you doing for God, if it's just you put in front of it, you already failed. Nothing with God is just. That's why I'm just a Christian. It's just no instruments. Oh, I'm just non-denominational. It's just a hotel. You diminish your faith by doing things like that. Why not buy into the culture to be like, you know what? I'm going to be transformed. Now, when I go back to how I live my everyday life, there are things that I'm still adjusting to. But in Sunday morning, I'm going to be transformed, because God was waiting at the hotel for us to get here to remember his son's death, his burial, and his resurrection. Kuman, then we'll close.
I mean, and a good example of that, like, that's why, like, when it came to, like, movie nights and us hanging out and stuff, like, our age group is, like, that's why with me, I always love doing it, because some people only look at church for Sunday.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And everyone's, you hear it all the time in church, that prays together, stays together. I say, but if you only see them on Sunday, how are you praying together? I say, like with us, Friday night, hey, let's get together and watch a movie. You know what I mean? Because we family. If I can't have you at my house on Friday night, why are
we gonna be together
you know
Sunday
morning? Why
morning?
I'm going to sit next to you on Sunday and try to smile and fake the smile? You know what I mean? Like what God said, He prepares the table for you and your enemies. You know what I mean? Like you gotta deal with that person. You can't just sit there and avoid them for the rest of your life. You gotta deal with it. And that enemy might be your best friend one day. And that's how I feel like with us, instead of us, like even with Eric, I was telling her, I was like, even on the website, like take pictures. If we going out to see the Avengers, I took a picture of it, put it on the website, because people got to know we just not a church.
Yeah.
Because there's so much other things going around. Like I have so many friends tell me, oh well, the priests, all they do is take the money and buy planes. You know what I mean? Or you know what I mean? Or all these church on DC on TV, it's like, no, it's more than that. We're a family. You know what I mean? Like that's how we are. Like I should be able to call Ellis 10 o'clock on Monday night and tell him I have issues with my life, and he should be able to sit there and listen and try to help me out. instead of me having to wait, I might not make it to Sunday. You know, I might have those issues on Monday and kill myself on Wednesday.
Yeah, who knows?
You know what I mean? You never know, because it's, you know what I mean? And we should have that kind of relationship that, you know what I mean? Like, if I need a bed to sleep on, you, hey, you still, what mattress that you bring downstairs, the mattress should be open, you know what I mean? I should have no issues.
That's
You know what I
why
mean?
Sunday to me was so important, because when you look back at those pictures, because pictures matter, you remember, oh, we are a family. So the negatives that people say of not having a building, we overcompensate because we do everything together, literally, right? Like Denisha showed me a picture, and one of the picture was me, Dev, and David, but me and Dev were holding hands. And she zoomed in. It was like, look, right now, if she showed that picture to my other friends, they would laugh because they don't understand that, right? But they don't understand that me and Dev do a lot of things together. When we went to Nepal, he was telling them he come with me everywhere. Since 2011, asked Nisha how many hours I probably spent in her house. You couldn't count, right? So when you see slides, you thinking, wow, it's slumber parties, it's birthdays, it's babies, it's you guys do everything together, and other people thinking, man, I just go to church. Like, what you talking about? Like, visually, it reminds us too, oh, this is like a family. This is different dynamics than just going somewhere. That's the benefit. Everything have pros and cons. The pro of not having a physical place is we interact a lot in 30 days outside of just Sunday and Wednesday. That's why when we start remembering Magi Live and the baskets for the babies and all those things, people had to come together and see each other outside of worship. And when you do that, you've become more close than people who have 1,000 members or the most beautiful building, because you say we were the building. We had to meet at this home or this place or that. Dad, and then y'all never want to go home.
No,
Go ahead, Dad. Y'all got all the comments tonight. Go ahead. Then we go to Sister
I look at the word committed. Jesus didn't run after Judas. He said, he who dips his hand with me. He didn't run after him. He didn't run after these people. Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and God chose 12 out of the 70 with an all-night prayer. I have that thing that ministers do when you leave and I call and you don't answer and I keep calling. I got a log for that. But I'm not running after you. I pray that the next Sunday you are in God's house, because it may not work for you here. And if you're not committed to here, your heart is not here. You don't need to be here. You got to go somewhere where you can commit to. This is not for everybody. Honestly, it's not. It's not. And that's reality. That's reality. So with that being said, in order for you to keep your soul, you need to be somewhere where you feel secure. Where you feel secure. Because if you're not going to work here, you're going to hold us back. Judas held them back. It's unfortunate that he did what he did by committing suicide, but they were free when he left. Because if he would have stayed, stuff would have hit the fan. They would have started jumping all over him, and he knew that.
That's why he killed himself.
Yes, he killed himself. He couldn't take it anymore. Because if Peter would have found that out, Lord help us.
Look at us, right? People will say, why you need a logo? We don't have a building. We don't have somewhere to go. We need a logo. Someone would have said that's a waste. A logo will remind somebody of church. It will. We don't have any physical place. Trumbull can say, oh, you know the steeple? Yeah. Though they don't need a logo. New Haven can say, oh, you know, right on the Gym Street when the street bends. Oh, yeah, I grew up. They don't need a logo. What are we going to say? We're not even in the same room every week. You need something where somebody can be like, who are y'all? And that's why those little things matter to be committed to. Never look at it as, oh, que sera, sera, or just. That's why I'm glad that committed part is because all those things build up. Sister Beulah?
Yeah, as Kumar was speaking about family, most of us don't really take our Christian life seriously. We are a family. God is the head. We are the body. So regardless to what, we are a family in Christ. He is our Father. he is the bridegroom, we are the bride. And if we take that seriously and love each other, trust each other, we will be better Christians.
And the other things be easier because we already have the commitment to God. Therefore, the commitment to each other will be easier to implement.
Yep.
So I agree, Mom.
So when you're talking about churches and numbers and knowing each other, and because you're a smaller group, we're a little more intimate. And so I've heard many people say that they go to a large church, that they don't know half the people in the church. Like they literally don't know them and don't care to know them.
Yeah.
It's like, they go in, they do their thing, worship, if you will, and then they leave, have no desire to know them, and that they're fine with that. How is that possible?
It's hard
That's
to
why
think because
sometimes-
10 years we've been like this.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, how large should a congregation really be?
Yeah.
Right? I know people like to start, it's all about the ego, right? The bigger my church is, the more
1,000 people,
accolades I
2
feel like I
morning
have.
services.
Yeah, that kind of thing. But really, how big should the congregation be when you think about it? If you're trying to emulate what the Bible says and how the churches were in the first century, then it wouldn't be, you would have smaller pockets so that people can meet the needs and know that there's a need. But when you have hundreds of people, you just come and go and do your own thing.
Look, here, if you was somebody who need business, you could never worship here because Bridgeport, you have no business. If you not here, somebody gonna say, what? Where's Ellis? Big church, you got all the business, right? But here is too tight. Somebody gonna say, hey, where's Andy?
But look.
And you gonna be, oh, where's the, hey, where's Erica? Because people gonna be like, hey, where's Donna at? You don't have no business here, just like certain families. That don't work for people. The hugging on Sunday, that don't work for some people. Some people say, I don't like hugging here. But here, people like that. So what we gonna do? We say, I don't like taking my shoes off. Well, but here we take shoes off. Like those are things that are cultural here that it's hard even when we go to other places. Sometimes what we'll say, man, they don't even have food. They don't want to break bread. They just get the cake, cookies, and Kool-Aid. We be looking like, what is this? What, y'all don't want to eat? Like those are little things that as a family over 10 years, we've gotten used to. Those things matter to how we worship and love one another as a group where someone who come in would may be uncomfortable to them. And we'll say, this is how we are though, right? Like we're not going to apologize how we are. Just like when we go somewhere else, we'll respect that. All of that, I feel, appeals to the love because that's what the people were criticizing the disciples for. Remember, they don't wash their hands. They don't do this. They don't do that. They can't even cast out the demons when Jesus was creating a family, us versus them. That's why he said, y'all have to love each other the way I love you. That's why Sister Beulah's point is right. God is saying every day, I already love y'all. I'm looking for you to love y'all. I already showed you I love you, but you every Sunday want to come only worship me, but not edify one another. So that part is true that it's easier to do in a setting where you know people. You got 2 church services, you don't know nobody. So I agree with that. That's difficult. Sister Cindy?
Oh, I grew up in a Catholic church. It was really big. I don't even know. Maybe we had 1,000 people, but we didn't know each other. I mean, you see the same people
every week.
You don't even know their names. You don't associate with them outside.
Yep.
Or maybe you got a couple of classmates in there, and you see them with their parents, and other than that,
nothing.
You go there, everybody goes, and then everybody leaves. And this is so much better.
Yeah. Since we were in, where were we seen Leah Fernandez in Stop and Shop or somewhere, maybe the mall, and she seen you and hugged you and she had people with her and was like, this is my brother. Now, Leah Fernandez, who's to be Leah Taylor, is Caucasian and about this tall. He black about this tall. So her people wanted to know, right? What you talking about, brother? You adopted? Her response was so, her response was so natural. Like she didn't even, she seen him. Like she just seen him and was like, oh, that's Brother Ellis. And remember, she's with people. So the people she with, I mean, you kind of looking down thinking, I mean, none of this match. So the people like, I mean, we've been knew you long time. What, you have a brother? Now you got to be like, what? Oh, not like that kind of brother. You don't understand, kind of, right? Because what's she going to say? Because even if she say, we go to church together, people going to say, like Sister Cindy, I go to church too. I don't see nobody I know and stop and shop and make a big deal. How are we going to explain that? Because it's hard. That's how family's supposed to be. Certain things you do as a family is hard to explain to friends, right? When did y'all start doing this? You think, I don't know, we always been doing this. That's how love works. It's hard. It should be that close. That's a benefit that we have. Some of them ministers left Sunday thinking, man, we got to start doing, because their group comes and goes. So it's hard to get them to do events. We are foundational off of events. So it's not hard to say, hey, let's do this time. Let's go to the movies. But it's hard to get people outside of Sunday and Wednesday from a building, because they're going to say, but it's not Sunday or Wednesday. And you thinking, let's go in the community and door knock. These things are difficult, yes.
Well, we're talking about Leah and Ellis being off in the difference of height, skin color. Well, years ago, of course, when Ellis and Hank worked in Sikorsky, and Hank would come down from the office and go by in the production area and see Ellis, and they, oh, hi, you know, and everybody's probably like, how do they two know?
Yeah, how they know each other.
A suit and a worker.
Yes, like think about that. Those are things that people take for granted that we would laugh at, literally. Like, oh, that's church. You don't understand. I don't know what to tell you.
Bob and Joanne Vaughan came from Missouri, and they, back in the 80s, all these large companies, IBM, Singer, was sending their executives up here to Connecticut, and a lot of them was working out of Stanford, going to New York. Well, when Sears was Housatonic, I was coming up the escalator from the auto section and the tool section downstairs. Bob was coming down with two other executives, and Bob hugged me. He said, Ellis, and he hugged me. My brother. So these other two guys looked at me and said, what are you talking about? And so Bob walked off explaining to them, but Bob was from the Church of Christ in Missouri. He came out here. He's a top executive in IBM at that time, or I think it was IBM, and he seen me in Sears. They was up, because then we had the mall. It was a little mall.
Yeah, downtown, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so Bob and those guys came across upstairs. I was coming downstairs, going upstairs, they coming downstairs, and it was just like that. So yeah, he walked off explaining, but he didn't differentiate in public and worship.
Right. Yeah, some of us, like I say Sunday, some of us see each other more than loved ones, right? There's cousins that I love. I will give my life for them. I don't see them as much as I see y'all. I see y'all multiple times a week. I see them holidays, right? Like, just think about that. You got people who their family not even in this country or in this state, some of us. So they rely on us. That's why when it's holiday time, people say, what we doing? You thinking, some of us thinking, oh, I got my own friends. But some of us thinking we don't got nowhere to go. What we having a cookout? Us as a group. We going to the movies because it's communal. That's how Jesus wanted it to be. I believe that in my heart. That's why I like us reading this book the way it is. I believe he was trying to establish a family, not going to church. They've been going 3 times a year to Jerusalem. He was trying to make a family, said, follow me, leave where y'all from and come where I'm going. Where are we going? Everywhere. We not going to one place. Remember, Jesus said, I don't have nowhere to lay my head. We going everywhere. That's us. We tell people, follow us. What room you going to be in? We don't know. We everywhere. We every room. Follow us. Get on our email list and our phone list. We'll tell you where you at. We at like a food truck. We don't have a restaurant. We got a food truck. We got a spiritual food truck. And that gets people to say, some people say, well, it's different. I don't know. I kind of like it. Y'all kind of funny, but I like it. And that's where it can grow. So just to say that again, as from Sunday, because I feel like I was encouraged by Sunday. I don't know anybody else. I was able to see 1,000-something photos. So I looked at it differently, but you remember how much work was put in. Right? Not just Bible studies and worship service, how much work all of y'all have put in over 10 years. That's why the brother was right when it was like, you should celebrate that. You should be thankful that, wow, I helped put in work. Your name will go down for forever. Legacy, literally legacy would be, there was a group of crazy people who used to meet every week in the hotel, and they was doing that for 10 years. That matters. All those things can grow into God only knows what it could be. Seriously. So look at those things as a positive and not as a negative, because people will feed that negative energy too.